Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Manisha. I'm the Director of Health Professions Advising, and today is day 4 of interview week. We're going to be talking about the MMI. So before I get started, I want to hear from you. What have you heard or what do you know about the MMI, or have you experienced an MMI? Okay, so multiple stations, you get a prompt, a few minutes to respond, different stations with different questions. You are all correct. And so the MMI, it's, just a little background on it. It's not testing any specific knowledge, so you don't have to know specifically about healthcare. It's very situational. So as we talked about yesterday, it's very situational, mostly designed for you to showcase communication, critical thinking, your interpersonal skills. You usually have 1 to 2 minutes to review the prompt and prepare, and we'll talk about how to use that 1 to 2 minutes wisely. And then you typically have 6 to 8 minutes to respond. Every institution's a little bit different, but that's how the timings are usually that I've seen. Some might let you have a piece of paper outside. If this was in person, some might say you have no writing material, but the prompt would be available. So if we're thinking of virtual format, the question might pop up on the screen, and then you meet with the interviewer, and the question might still be up maybe in the chat or for somewhere for you to be able to glance at it. Some benefits of the MMI. Yes, it can be a little unnerving. You have a very short time to prepare. You might not know what the questions are, but they're looking at that. They're looking at your adaptability as well. The good thing is every station is a new start. So let's say you're going through 10 stations. Every station, that rater is only evaluating you based on how you respond to others in that station, similar to the CASPER. So the MMI came first. The same organization that created the MMI created CASPER. So if you didn't do so well, if you struggled at that particular prompt, you shake it off, because the next station is brand new. They know nothing about how you did before. They know nothing about your struggles. Also, when they're rating, they have to rate before they can exit the room, whether it's in person or virtual. So no one is communicating with each other about how you did in different stations until after scores are submitted. So if you got, a station might have gotten the best of you, that's okay. Move on. The next one is going to be better. Having served as a rater for Stanford Medical School, I know, some of the coaching that they've given us as raters is, what we're listening for. I'm listening for, your communication skills. How compassionate were you in your response? How did you communicate to me? And what content do you have related to the prompt? Kind of in that order. That's what I'm looking for. So again, in thinking it out. Another benefit of the MMI is you can be very strategic in how you respond. But having served as that rater, I also know I was a little more generous the first 3 stations, depending on how many stations were total, because I know there's nerves. We were asked to be a little bit more sensitive and generous. But by station 3, 4, you need to have locked it in. My expectation is you have your nerves under control and you can manage it. That's, again, me evaluating your ability to adapt yourself. The format of the MMI, as I mentioned, as some of you may have mentioned, it's 6 to 10 short interviews over a period of time, multiple mini interviews. Different schools might use the term MMI in different ways. So the traditional MMI, multiple mini interview, is you might have 6 to 10 stations over a period of 1.5 to 2 hours, 1 to 2 minutes of prep, conversation that lasts 5 to 8 minutes. And every interviewer is a little bit different. Sometimes schools that might have like 2 or 3 15-minute interviews might also call those MMI, but those are more one-on-one behavioral style interviews. So if you hear the term that your school is offering an MMI, I would, clarify, is it what we're calling an MMI today, or is it I'm just meeting different people, but it's still an interview about me? With MMIs, you're getting more situational questions, but I'm skipping ahead. You see that little picture on the upper right? That's kind of what an MMI might look like. You're going room to room if it was in person. Virtually, if they use Zoom, bunch of breakout rooms, and where you're being moved from room to room, meeting different raters. And we call them raters because they're not necessarily, because of the types of questions, it's really not about you, it's just really about how you respond. Also, something to be aware, as I said, everybody's different. Each rater is different. Some might be very friendly and be like smiling and nodding, and some might just be sitting very expressionless. They were called hawks or doves. Just because they aren't smiling doesn't mean you're not doing well. What they might be, as I mentioned yesterday, it might be a little bit of a stress type situation, and they're seeing how you respond. So you have to pull the response from yourself, not, in this case, rely on somebody else's interpersonal or somebody else's kind of body language to know you're doing well. You develop the response and you go with it. Now, some schools, it might be a little bit more interactive, where the rater might have follow-up questions. They might be speaking with you. Some, they're not. And so jumping ahead, and then I'll pause for questions, this is what it might look like, with the different types of questions or scenarios you might be getting. Some might involve an interaction with an actor. UC Davis Medical School is one of those that has historically used an actor. During the pandemic, when it went virtual, it kind of ebbed and flowed a little bit, but they would use an actor. So you would actually be walking into a room. The rater would be sitting like a fly on the wall, and you are engaging directly with that actor. You are playing out a scene. Some might have an essay writing station. This is very common for pharmacy and sometimes dentistry interviews. This station might be a little bit longer than others, or it might not be, depending on what they're hoping to glean from you. Many schools have what I call a standard interview station. So 7 years ago, it was purely situational. And schools found that candidates were getting a little unnerved because they did not really have an opportunity to speak about themselves or share anything about themselves on their interview day. So now more and more schools are infusing what we call a standard interview station, where it might be the tell me about yourself, why medicine, why this school type situation for you to answer. There might also be a teamwork station where you're going to have 2 candidates and 2 raters. Each rater is evaluating their candidate, and you will be tasked with something. I've participated in that as well as a rater, watching my candidate perform a task. In one instance, you're called the giver, where you might be giving instructions for the task, and one you might be called the receiver, where you're responding to the instructions of a task. And I know that these teamwork type stations have continued even in the virtual environment. Ethical scenarios are pretty common. So it's, again, reasoning it out, making sure you're showcasing you have an understanding of different that you are aware different perceptions, different beliefs, different values may exist. Also, there might be a rest station where it's an opportunity for you to just simply catch your breath, because 2 hours of this is very long, hopping in and out of in-person or virtual rooms. It is still very tiring. So I'm going to pause there. The next couple of slides, we're going to be talking about preparation, but any questions in terms of what stations might look like, or anything else about format or anything else that I've already covered? Give it another second. You can either unmute or put it in the chat. Otherwise, I will move on to how to prepare. All right, then let's talk about preparation. So because the MMI isn't testing specific knowledge, there isn't much content you would need to prepare. It's really about your critical thinking and how you're communicating your response. So from an interpersonal perspective, practice expressing yourself with I statements, I, me, my. If you've worked with me at all through the application cycle, between your personal statement and secondaries, I'm a proponent it's about you. I want to hear about you. I want you to claim your thoughts, claim your ideas. So I, me, my. Practice giving opinions. If a question, if a prompt or scenario is asking you your opinion, I expect you to be able to provide me your opinion. Now, I'm still going to encourage you to give, showcase that you're aware that, there are many perceptions, but I am asking you for an opinion. You want your answers to be clear and concise. And so again, we're going to talk about how to use that preparation time, but practice also presenting in a logical answer in timed environments. So this is not a time to just free flow and then try to edit down. Put a 5-minute timer, put a 7-minute timer, an 8-minute timer. If you Google MMI questions, you're going to get a whole bunch on the internet. Set a timer and, practice going through it. There are a lot of possible scenarios that you could be presented. So you really can't prepare for all of them. So given that we can't prep our answers, we're going to focus on preparing how we answer the question, how we're being clear and concise, how we're being logical. So 1 to 2 minutes, right? So I initially want you to think about, you have that 2 minutes and then the 5 to 8 minutes to respond. So oh gosh, that little picture's covering some words. But one, I want you to think about, with that 2 minutes, you're not trying to answer the question. There's no way you can put together a 5, 6, 7-minute response in 2 minutes. So in those 2 minutes, what you're trying to do is identify who's impacted by this situation. Whose perspectives do I need to address the situation from? What are the issues involved in this situation? That's what you're laying out first. Again, some schools might give you a piece of paper, or if it's virtual, might say, yes, you can take notes. Some schools might say, absolutely not, we're still watching you, you cannot take notes. So just know the rules of the school that your interview is with. Can you take notes? Can you not take notes? But again, in those 1 to 2 minutes, who's impacted? What perspectives do I need to address this from? What are the issues involved that I need to address? Is this asking me for my opinion? So be prepared after I lay out the situation to give an opinion. So I want you to practice recording yourself as you're doing this. I want you to practice, your body language. You're still on camera. Unless the school says no one's watching you, you're still on camera. So watch your fidgeting, your nervousness, watch, what you're doing in that 1 to 2 minutes. But during the time you're also answering, I want you to think about eye contact. Again, we talked about looking at the camera versus looking at the screen or looking down. It's okay to look away if you're gathering your thoughts, I want you to be careful of slang or filler words or rambling. If you've completed a thought, stop. Don't keep going. Right? Stop, gather yourself, and then continue the response. Monitor your speed of speech, your tone, your volume. If you notice some things, the interviewer has as well. But let me go back to this. So you've taken that 2 minutes. So in responding, take it from each perspective, one perspective at a time, and then the issues associated with each perspective. And when we go through some of these sample questions, you'll see what I mean. If it's asking you a kind of a pro or con, or what do you think about these two ideas, then again, take one idea, what are the benefits and challenges, pros and cons of that idea, lay them all out. Then take the next idea and do the same. And then if the question is asking you for an opinion, you can either start with your opinion, lay all this out, or end with your opinion after you've laid out the pros and cons of the two different sides or perspectives provided. I'm going to pause there. Any questions for me right now? So either unmute or put it in the chat.
When it comes to prompts that want you to give an opinion, is it more important that you state your opinion first and then kind of address both sides, or address both sides and then kind of wrap it up with your take on which side you will be picking?
I don't think it matters.
Okay.
As long as you clearly articulate that there might be multiple perspectives or sides, and that you do in fact have an opinion.
Okay, thank you.
So for me, it doesn't matter. I know my style. I'm going to say, well, on one hand, this benefits and challenges. On the other hand, or I've had people in mock interviews come out with, this is what I think, and then back it up with both why and also, but I also understand that, there's another school of thought out there. So, and then to explain why it's very important that you're comfortable expressing opinions is, again, going through the experience, serving as a rater for, multiple years with Stanford. I've had individuals, well, let me back up. Why do you think it's important, if the question's asking for an opinion, that you state an opinion? Why do you think that's an important part of the response?
Because that's literally what they're asking for. So they just want to know that you are listening and can make a decision and can articulate how you feel about something.
Yeah, that's some of it. As a healthcare professional, are you going to have all the information on your patient all the time? Might you be in a critical emergency situation and have to move quickly? What do you think? Yeah. So, yeah, you're not going to have all the information, and you need to be comfortable and confident going with what you have. And they're looking for that, right? They're looking for your ability to, again, critically think, lay out what you know, and then move forward with what you know. That's really important as a healthcare professional. Going back to the example I was sharing, I had a candidate who, hemmed and hawed and hemmed and hawed. And Stanford did allow me to ask some follow-up questions, and she would lay out some information, and I would say, well, what do you think you would do? She's like, well, I don't have all the information. Then she would lay out some more, and I had to ask her 4 times. So what would you do? And while eventually she got there, with the amount of hemming and hawing and, gosh, I really need to gather more information, I actually rated her lower, because she wasn't answering the question, but to the insecurity or wanting to have all the information. And she actually said at some point, I would want more information. I need to gather more information. And I'm like, well, this is what we have right now. And so you are being evaluated on it. It doesn't mean to make a brash decision, which is why you're laying out what's building up to that, maybe, or here's my opinion and here's what was behind it. You're still giving me what's behind it, what led you to this, or what you lead into your opinion. It doesn't matter which direction, but you're still providing support. So that's important to know. Now, depending on the question, I don't expect you to tie this back to personal experience. Not all things are going to ask you, just like with situational, not all things are going to ask you to tie in your experience. Again, I had a situation where I asked a very specific question and somebody suddenly started talking about their research. And I was like, but that's not what the scenario was. Now, there might be a case where, I went through something very similar to this and you might tie that in. But in most cases, that's not what I'm expecting. I'm not expecting you to bring in a personal experience unless it makes sense. So there are some questions, yes, absolutely, it might make sense. Like with my experience doing, that's part of my support in my response for my opinion. But if it's unrelated, don't give me apples and oranges. I'm asking you about apples and you're trying to explain to me, but the orange is like this. That's going to get you marked down. In laying out your response, like I said, start from one end, move through it kind of concisely. So if I'm starting from this perspective, here are the issues, next perspective, and then finish it up. The nice thing is, with an MMI that's a little different than a one-on-one interview or behavioral, is if you remember something after going through your responses, you are actually okay to go back and say, as I was thinking about this, I also believe this with this perspective. And as a rater, I'm taking all that in. Staying in order is helpful, but I like when people have gotten back if they missed something out and they caught it and they filled in. Now, I mentioned some schools would have follow-up. Stanford happened to be one of those. Some schools, there's no follow-up. I'm just sitting there. I was told to just sit and listen. So this is me during your interview. Now, I might nod and smile, but don't expect me to have more questions for you to help you flesh it out. If it's an acting situation, you walk in, well, when it was in person, but virtually, you would enter the room, you would let the rater know your ID number. And then when the time begins, you start engaging with the actor and playing out the situation. When it was in person, it was candidates, go to your next door. Candidates, turn around. You now have 2 minutes to review the prompt. Candidates, enter the room. Your 8 minutes begin now. Candidates, time's up. Please exit the room. That was it. It was kind of freaky because it was through a speaker. So it was like I would jerk every time that voice would speak. But, virtually, you're going to have something very similar. Candidates, as somebody's moving you or the rater, you will have 1 minute. Candidates, turn on your camera, or if your camera's on, begin. And so you can gauge, you will know early on if that person's really engaging with you or if they were told to sit there, because that's how that school does their interviews. They're not interactive. It's more you responding. The way most prompts are, let's say it was an 8-minute school, that most people can, I've found with most prompts, 5 to 5 minutes you can fill. And then I would like to sit, kind of gather your thoughts and keep going. But most prompts are hefty enough that you will not finish, and that's okay. You're going to run out of time because they're pretty hefty. And so, Catherine, you asked, should I give my opinion at the beginning or at the end? It doesn't matter as long as you make sure you leave time for it. So you can kind of lead into it, give your opinion, and then sort of keep going. There are group stations, Sweta, absolutely. With the virtual format, I am seeing like the interactive stations, but yes, I have seen a station where you as a group might be doing something. And so like a team station, both virtually and in person, I've done this. So when we used to host these at HPA, I would have all the stations represented, just so you get a little bit of both, everything. Now, what's going to be, if you know, we'll talk about this after the recording, like what, in a little bit about tomorrow. But yeah, that is a thing. Some schools have done group activities. So again, it's dependent on the school. This is one of the few times, like I said, with laser focus, go into Reddit or SDN, figure out what your interview day is going to be like or how that school's interviews run, and then back out. Don't read all the comments. Don't go down that road. It's just gonna lead you to some, you know, an uncomfortable space or doubting yourself. But go and figure out your interview and back out. Rachel, that's a good question. When it was in person, I think most candidates did. Hi, my name is, but your 8 minutes truly began. So I don't expect too many niceties, but yeah, you can say hello. Nice, you know, my name is, and then I would just go straight into the question. 8 minutes is gonna 5, 7, 8 minutes. It's gonna go fast. One of the things I would say is you may not want to ask your rater who they are because they may not be able to disclose it. So many times when I was at Stanford, so Stanford pulled from a very diverse pool. You could have patients and medical students and pre-health advisors and community members because they were really wanting to know what different people thought about their candidates. And so, you know, a candidate would walk in and say, hi, my name is, and while we're waiting for the interview to start, oh, do you teach here? And, you know, my response is, I'm sorry, I'm not able to disclose who I am. And, you know, that's a super uncomfortable feeling for the candidate. So yeah, introduce yourself, but I wouldn't necessarily go past that because we're not disclosing who we are. With the point, why do you think we're not disclosing who we are? Yeah. Not so we don't reach out, but your response as a candidate might change. If I were a patient, if I were a faculty, if I was a med student, if I was a nurse, right? You should treat everyone the same, but you as a candidate might, you know, be influenced by that, and they wanted to kind of remove all of that. Now, did some interviewers or raters introduce themselves? Sometimes I try to stay true to form and just kind of give myself as a neutral space. But some, you know, we were instructed, do not share who you are, everybody, so that it's not influencing the candidate. So a few closing details, and then I want to take some time and look at some sample questions. So we're getting to the interactive piece. Again, this is to help you. But the interviewer, you know, as a rater, I was looking at how you delivered your response. And what I mean by that is you could give me a technically flawless response, but if there was no compassion in your answer, I might feel a certain way about that. So what am I evaluating you on? You might be my physician, my parent's physician, my child's physician, or healthcare practitioner. You might be my colleague. Do I want to work with you? Would I want you treating a family member? So I had a candidate once who gave a technically flawless response in 3 minutes. Remember, we have 8 minutes together, but it was delivered in like, okay, so this is what I would do. And I would do this, and then I would do this, and my opinion on this is this. Flawless. If I were to speak to you like that, how would you feel if I were your physician speaking to you like that? Is that okay to you?
It's like very robotic. It's not very, doesn't sound like you're talking to me like a human.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it feels very hasty and yeah.
Yeah, that they're not self-aware. You might have to deliver bad news. You will likely in your lifetime as a healthcare practitioner have to deliver sensitive news. It's not about the news. It's about how you're presenting that information. Right? So that's what I'm listening for. Again, make sure you're answering the question that was asked of you, not, I really want to tell you about my research, or I really want to tell you about the student-run clinic I've been at for 3 years. Answer what I've asked you. Again, positive, as I mentioned, everything's a fresh start. So if you had issues, shake it off, regain some ground in that next station. But again, my expectation is I expect nerves maybe in the first, second, possibly third station, but by third or fourth, I expect you to have managed yourself. I expect you to work through those nerves and have more confidence as you're going through this. You have multiple chances of making a really positive first impression, or maybe not so positive. So really think about how you're presenting yourself. Focus on the positives and don't downplay or underplay yourself. Be professional and courteous to everyone. So in a practice MMI, if you tend to be more concise, again, like I said, I've worked hard to slow down my presentation to really, really give empathy and compassion in how I'm responding. I agree, I'm a rambler too, Catherine. I'm a total rambler. And so, but take the pauses, take the moments and say, yes, you can be concise, but you can still be compassionate. And so flesh it out. Under time and well thought out is okay. Finished multiple minutes early, you're leaving something out. So I would take a moment and say, these are my initial thoughts. I'm gonna just take a few moments and see what else I'd like to add. And then kind of go back. So maybe you gave an initial burst of an answer and then go back and flesh out some of the ideas, right? This is your opportunity. Maybe you have an example, but that's the opportunity that you would take. But again, flesh it out, be compassionate. Don't try to machine gun, or in this case, I'm just going to use Stanford again. I know that some of the days were designated MD, PhD candidates. I knew within typically a minute if that was one of the MD, PhD candidates, because they spoke very precisely, very deliberately, very like as if it was a research topic. Many did, not all of them. And so that's what I mean. A machine gun answer is not okay. I need to trust that, if my child comes to you, if my parent comes to you, that regardless of the news, I'm treated like a person, my family's treated like a person. And that's why schools might include nurses and PAs and patients and medical students and faculty, because we're all wanting to make sure you work well with everyone. Often in secondaries, isn't this a question? How you're going to be in a very diverse environment, working with many different people. How do you do that? This is you demonstrating that. Before we jump into the samples, any questions? And there will continue. I have 3 sample questions. We definitely have more time for questions later. And then the question I have for you, because the next 3, with the 3 questions, they are a little bit more interactive. Do you want me to, keep the recording on for other people who might see this, or shall we stop so we can have more of a conversation about this? Would that make you feel more comfortable? Because I am going to ask you all to help respond. Okay. Anybody want anything different? Again, I would like you to participate moving forward. Okay. Okay. Again, I just want to make sure you're all comfortable, but I need you to respond. And so we'll go from there. So I'm not going to time it everything, but I'm going to put out a sample question. And if someone is comfortable speaking up, and again, the one thing, because this is situational, the one coming up, people might have different opinions, and that's okay. We're okay with different opinions, but I'm going to pull up the question. I would appreciate somebody jumping in and maybe starting an initial response. And then let's see where we go from there from all of you. So here's a sample question. So again, I want you to think about perspective. So maybe let me give you a 30, minute to look it over, and maybe I'll ask some questions to help you frame your thinking. And if someone, if you can kind of do a thumbs up, just so I know you've had a chance to read it. Okay, so let's start off with some questions. So remember, what did I say? We want to look at perspectives or issues. So in this case, whose perspective should we, who are the people involved in the situation?
Joe, his boss, and the injured woman.
Okay. So when we're reading the questions, what issues from each perspectives do you see? Let's start with Joe. What's going through Joe's head right now?
I think Joe is concerned he could lose his job, but he's also in this dilemma where he really wants to help this woman. So if he just passes her by, she could, be at risk for losing her life, but he would keep his job. So it's also, this ethical dilemma of what is he supposed to do?
Okay. So let's talk about the boss.
He has a little bit of a reputation to uphold with his customers, and also, he can't just be giving out free pizzas because that's doesn't pay the bills.
Okay. Now we have this woman who appears to be injured. What might be some issues with her?
She might be alone. She might not have her cell phone. She might really need someone to come help her in that moment. She might be like disoriented, might be unconscious. So
Okay.
it's important that someone helps her.
Okay. So the questions you're being asked with this is, what do you think Joe should do? And justify your solution in terms of practical and ethical considerations. So I've heard from some of you, but does anyone feel comfortable? Again, this is a judgment-free zone. What do you think Joe should do and why?
I think there are a couple alternatives he could do. Maybe he could call his boss right away and say, hey, there was a really serious accident right now. I would feel bad letting this woman just sit on the side of the road. Could I feel obligated to do, stay with her, or could someone else come and pick up this pizza and deliver it? Or maybe Joe could call 911 right away and have someone else come and help, and he could still deliver the pizza. But, I don't know how comfortable he feels leaving this woman alone. So 2 options, I think.
Great, thank you. Does anyone want to add to that? Or have a different perspective?
I was going to say from my time as a delivery driver, I had similar policies at the sandwich shop I worked at, but there was a clause in our contract agreement that said if very external circumstances happen, like as long as you had proof for it, there wouldn't be any sort of backlash. So I guess I would advise Joe to consider if that exists. I know he can't look into it at this moment, but maybe if he knows if that exists off the top of his head.
Okay. Anything else anyone would want to add to this question?
If he did choose to check on the lady and it held him back a few minutes, but it ended up being okay, or he was able to help find someone to take care of her, and then got to the customer's house a little bit late, he can ask the customer to sympathize with him, and even though if it's over 30 minutes, maybe they could pay anyway, and blah blah blah. I don't know. See if that'll help resolve his issue.
Okay. How was this for you all? Or Catherine, anybody want to add anything else?
I was just gonna add something. I would say in terms of like which side would I pick, I would pick for Joe to stay with the woman, and if the repercussions mean that he would be fired from his job, and then he's asked about it in like an interview with a future company, he could kind of go into detail and explain why he was fired. It wasn't, because he stole something or something negative, but it was actually because he was showing compassion. And I would hope that a future employer would look positively on that quality, and not hold like the fact that he was fired against him.
Yeah. Now let's look at the two questions. What do you think Joe should do, and justify it with practical and ethical considerations? So all of you have given good pieces, calling 911, calling the boss, as examples. It didn't say, it wasn't a do this or do this, it's what. It was a very general what. And so based on experiences you all may have, you all contributed pieces. Now, practical and ethical considerations. One thing that I might add to this, and again, because we live in a very litigious environment, that might be a factor. Do I know first aid if I'm Joe? What are some basic things? Do I have any tools? Do I carry a first aid kit? Where am I? I might actually consider kind of laying out some of this to help support my response. Maybe this woman was in a neighborhood, maybe this woman was on a busy street, maybe you saw this at the corner of your eye. But the nice thing about but something is you could sort of create your little what if and build from there. But all of you had pieces to contribute. Rachel, yeah, it's Casper-esque. It's very much having you analyze and sort of add components to this is why I would do it. Anything else we want to add about this before we try sample number 2? Okay. So again, I'll give you a little bit to read it, and then I will again kind of frame what I'm listening for. All right, so whose perspective or who is involved in this? voters, the state, the government. Okay, so initially that's a good place to start. What are issues from, maybe let's start with the voters. What are some issues that you're seeing? And again, you can unmute or you can type it up. What are some issues?
Lots of issues. I mean, voting is not accessible to everyone, especially if they don't get off of work and need to work to provide for their family. Furthermore, to have $100 fine if they cannot make it to the to vote could be very detrimental to a family. On the other hand, not voting is also a choice that people are allowed to make without repercussions. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else we would, any other perspectives or issues from the voter side?
I'd say just going off Lucero, it's like this bill specifically would affect impoverished or underserved communities because $100 to maybe a richer person or a richer family wouldn't mean much, but $100 to a poorer family would mean a lot.
Okay.
One more thing I might add is it doesn't take into account like language barriers or like literacy differences.
Okay.
And then location, oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, please go ahead.
Like accessibility in terms of location also could be an issue if you have to like drive from very far away because you don't live close to a voting facility.
Okay, so can voting centers support this or have to turn people away? So now that we have this issue, this perspective, what does the government, what might their perspective be, and what might they need to consider?
So I'm not saying I agree with this, but perspective wise, I think the government, is trying to incentivize saying, hey, we want to hear everyone's opinion. So we're encouraging everyone to vote. However, they could incentivize people in a different way, not necessarily by fining them and punishing them, but maybe say, hey, if you vote, we'll give you $100 and just reverse it. But that's one way to think about it.
Okay, what else?
I think it could also potentially be problematic in terms of what someone said earlier about literacy and language barriers, because someone could potentially go and vote and not know who they're voting for and what they stand for, and it would skew results to a specific direction that may not be the direction that reflects the public.
Okay.
Also, I think the intention with the bill is to encourage or to hear the opinions of the majority or the opinions of everyone. But like someone mentioned earlier, I can't remember who it was, and $100 fine is going to be really crippling to some individuals, but some people might not have a problem with that. So your results from this bill or the voting on the bill is going to kind of be skewed in one direction because of the fine.
Yeah.
I was going to say a lot of people who vote in elections now are middle or upper class. And so again, this might be from the government's perspective, specifically targeting poorer individuals or poorer communities in order to try and hear their opinions, but going about it the wrong way.
Mm-hmm. So, oh, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was gonna say, also from the perspective of the government, they're trying to, like Rachel mentioned earlier, I think, have everybody give an opinion on the elections by voting. But again, I think it disrupts the integrity of the elections because people are then forced to vote not out of genuine opinions, but just because they're forced or they're just trying to avoid fines. So it in effect also affects the integrity of the elections. but again, also like in terms of socioeconomic status too, like all the people mentioned, people may not be able to vote for certain reasons, and also people who aren't able to afford this are fine. So it affects both parties negatively, basically.
So the actual question with this is, what do you think about this bill? So in this case, you are laying all this out. You know, this question could have been framed a little bit different. In fact, you might not even get a prompt. It might just say a proposed bill would require all individuals to vote in federal elections or face $100 fine. That might be your entire prompt with no question, right? Or it could be, in this case, what do you think about the bill? What do you think from, do you agree with this bill? State, all of these could be what you're presented with during your MMI. An actual question or no question. So making sure that you're also responding according to what there's that. If there's no question whatsoever, then laying it all out. One of the things I just remember to be mindful of, whatever your thoughts are on the prompt, as one who is very emotive, it's good to express you want to express your opinions, but be careful of, how do I say it? I once had someone get so passionate about the question that they were yelling at me during the interview, like actually yelling at me. And this wasn't a mock interview, this was at Stanford. And I was sitting there going, I've only felt unsafe twice in my life as a professional. This is one of them, at the level of volume this person. So have energy and enthusiasm, but also be mindful that we're professionals. And so I only bring that up just because I was thinking about that yeller, and I'm like, dear God, no. And this was one of the few times I spoke with the dean, like, no, and this is why. And I wasn't the only one, like 4 of us went up to the dean. So I don't want you to censor yourself. I want you to present yourself professionally. And that might include, gosh, this is really tough. Like I would struggle on the side of I would, just thinking about the government doing this as someone as thinking about a low socioeconomic community, their ability to afford something like this comes into question. And so again, thinking about how you're framing it, and still staying authentic to yourself. Anything else we want to talk about on this one before we move on to another sample?
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So when it's asking just like a general, like, what do you think about this bill? Would it be appropriate to like offer an alternative, or is that getting away from like the scope of this question? Like if I say, I am not the greatest fan of this bill, but I think it could be more beneficial if we offered incentives or just like created more like accessible voting sites or something like that, or is that too far?
No, I think if you say the bill as is, here are some, benefits and challenges. Again, I think that's fine in this case because of the very general way the question was formed. So I think, yeah, if you could say as an alternative, I think as standing alone, this bill is not going to be very successful and will have, I believe, a lot of pushback. As an alternative, I might offer. That's part of what I think about this. I don't think this bill is going to work. So here's what else I think, right? The question is, what do you think? But yeah, I think in this case, it might be okay. Anything else about this, or before we move on to number 3? All right. So number 3, I'm going to preface with is meant to be an interactive one with an actor. So I'm just going to change it a little bit. Actually, you know what? I am going to be the person you're talking to. Let's go with that. But again, I'll kind of prep you with how do we, well, maybe let's talk about how we approach this. So take a few seconds or take a minute. I take it back. I'm going to be Tim, but I'm not going to be a talkative Tim. What are some things you would say to me?
So this one's really hard, but I'll give my best shot. um, hey Tim, it's good seeing you today. How are you?
I'm
Okay,
okay.
that's okay. You okay?
You keep going. I'm not going to act.
Okay, got it. um, so I'm here to work on this group project with you, and a couple of the group members are, outside. They had something to talk about, but I kind of wanted to talk with you about something a little personal. And I definitely hope I want to preface with, I don't mean to offend you by any means. And this already starting off on a kind of bad foot. But I do want to say some of the other group members have kind of mentioned to me that they were a little concerned about working with you because you had a strong sense of smell, or not sense of smell. You had a strong scent and I was wondering if that was something you noticed as well, or yeah. Oh God.
This is hard.
Yeah,
So
that's really
thank you
hard.
for being brave and taking a stab at it.
Yeah, that was really good, Rachel. This is really hard.
Thanks,
I
Cicero.
I think with this one, it might be a good idea to ask Tim what's going on with his personal life. Try to lead with compassion. Maybe try to figure out um, in a less direct way, like why maybe he's having a hard time. Um, Maybe keeping up with his personal hygiene. Perhaps he's lost housing, and he needs a place to take a shower, which you could offer your house if you feel comfortable. Um, yeah, I would try to talk to Tim, be like, hey, what's going on? How's your home life? How are things going with your support system? Are you, maybe like try to figure out maybe he's depressed or something like that. I don't know.
But
Okay.
in this case, would the actor give you feedback on that? Like if Lucero was like, "Oh, hey, like, how's your home life?" Well, one, is it bad to assume that something's not going on well? But would the actor get feedback too?
No, I would engage. I might be like, what? I don't know what you're talking about. Or, so I've been given a role as an actor that I'm going to play out. You don't know what I'm going to play out, but I'm going to play something out. So yes. Anybody else want to take a stab before I add? What else should we be considering? And thank you for being brave.
Can I try?
Yeah.
I would walk in and I would say, "Hi, Tim. I hope you're doing well. I know this might be an uncomfortable conversation, but I noticed you had some body odor recently, and I was wondering if there's anything I can do to help you or if you want to talk about it."
Okay. Anything else anyone would want to try? All right. So very uncomfortable, right? Very hard to talk about. So a few of you brought up some points that there could be various reasons, right? Somebody might be homeless, somebody might be depressed. Somebody asked, are you aware of this? So what else, if we're speaking with the specifics, and again, just kind of broadening this question out, what else can cause body? Why else might somebody might have a strong odor?
It could be a medical issue, like if they have an infection or something somewhere, maybe in their mouth, or an abscess growing.
Some medications, maybe?
True, that too.
Let's think also in the perspective of diversity.
I think some cultures don't necessarily wear deodorant either, right? I
Mhm.
think, or people choose a natural form of, I don't, they just don't choose not to, which is
Mhm.
fine. They just don't.
And so when you're approaching Tim, all of this, again, we approach from a place of compassion. We approach from, some of you might go straight to the point. Some of you might start off with, hey, how are you doing? Is everything okay? Maybe kind of going around it. But again, we always want to approach from a place of compassion. I used to work with international students a lot from all over the world. And this presented itself very frequently in my office as an advisor, as a counselor, very frequently. And it was challenging. It was very challenging. And one day I just happened to be, Googling some information, and the school provided, I found something on the international student website, and it was a packing list for the international students. Two shirts, 2 pants, 4 sets of underwear. And so in reading this, I came to understand these students are coming to this country with a suitcase their whole lives for the next 4 years, and unless they add to it, started with 1 suitcase. And that for me changed my perspective, because I have a very sensitive nose, very sensitive nose, I have allergies, I have asthma, very sensitive to being triggered. And so I was thinking about it from my perspective, like, I don't want to be triggered. But that for me changed my headspace, that I might be talking to someone. So did I bring up the smell? Yes. With a question on solutions, right? Maybe some cultures, maybe people don't know how to do laundry as much, or they're saving their coins for the weekend, or they didn't know. While it's okay to wear a shirt twice in winter, maybe in summer, that might not be okay, because it might be their first time experiencing 105. And so we want, in this case, to present ourselves with what could be involved, and how do I want to approach this person? How am I doing it with compassion? But also, there is something that needs to be resolved. We're not leaving it alone. We still need to resolve it, but how are we getting to there? And that's a little bit, again, everyone might be a little different in their approach, but it's always with compassion. So I'm going to pause there. Any questions? And we have a few minutes. I don't mind kind of playing around with a few more questions. I don't have anything else typed up, but how to break down questions. But anything else on this one?
So if there was an actor, how would you have responded to this exactly and handle the conversation? Just curious.
I hate this question. I'm gonna be honest. But again, with some experiences along the way and in watching colleagues, so I'm gonna beat around the bush a little bit and then come to it. When it's been a both cultural and, in a case, a gender, I guess, if we were able to identify or know the gender the person's presenting. In one office, we, it happened to be a male identifying student. We had a male colleague approach it because of also the culture behind it of the student that presented with a very strong odor. And that male colleague came back and they just said, like, this person, they were like we didn't smell it. And I wasn't repeating the clothes I was wearing when it was like we had, you know, the male colleague had to say, actually, I do see you wear the same shirt twice in a row. And I know doing laundry is not fun, but it's 100 in Davis all summer. For me, with again, some of these perceptions, I think I would have said, hey, you know, how are you doing? One, I'm going to be honest, I would meet with this person outdoors. I cannot hide it from my face. I know me. How are you doing? How are things going? How's school been like? Anything different in your life? And so if none of that elicited any kind of response, I think I would then take the deep dive in and say, so I think one of the persons earlier said, you know, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about something that's extremely sensitive. Some of the group members have noticed there's an odor about you. And I just wanted to make sure you were okay. If you knew there was an odor, and if there's any way I could help support, or if it's none of my business, you can tell me it's none of my business. But I wanted you to be aware.
Okay, that's super helpful. But I was more just like, it's so hard to not make someone feel embarrassed. So I was just trying to avoid. Okay, got it.
Like, Rachel, they're going to be, and this is uncomfortable, and this sucks. And we're just, you know, you're being watched on how you're going to handle it, and be okay handling it. I know of a scenario where, again, just speaking about the acting one, right? We can talk about other ones where you walk into the room, right? There's two people in a room, and, you know, they introduce themselves, you know, my name is, I'm here for my annual exam. My mom's here with me. The mom's phone rings. She's like, oh, I'll be right back. I need to take this call. The mom leaves the room, and the girl says, I would like birth control. Right? Or you walk into a room and there's someone in a corner crying. That's what you walk in on. And so again, we're trying to figure out what's going on. We're trying to figure out what's going on. So these weren't meant to be comfortable. They're not okay, but it's using all of that within us. And again, if you think about it, as a healthcare practitioner, are we going to be presented with patients that come from different life experiences, that, or something makes them scared and uncomfortable, and we got to deal with it in the moment. I might be going, I'm going to use my kid as an example. I've had a kid that's dealt with some serious illnesses, hates, I won't say hate is very strong, is very uncomfortable with healthcare practitioners because she's been poked and prodded a lot in her young 6.5 years. And so when we say we're going to the doctors, the first question is there a needle? Because that is setting the stage. And I don't know what's right or wrong. I don't like lying to my kids, but sometimes I don't know. I don't say anything, but she's very vocal. She has kicked medical healthcare practitioners. She has screamed at the top of their lungs, you are a horrible human being. I don't think you're nice, what you're doing to me. She's been doing this since 3. And I'm just like, I'm so sorry. But that person across has to deal with this, has to deal with me as a parent who's also watching you, but also apologizing for my kid. This healthcare is messy, right? You have to deal with all of this. And so by peppering some of this, and you're going to learn this, I'm going to stop right for a second and say, you're going to learn this, but what you're being evaluated on, do you have those basic competencies that you're walking in the door? Can you be coached? Can you be trained? Right? That's what you're being evaluated on. It's not necessarily, do you have the right answer? But are you coming from a good place? Are you coming from a place of inquisitiveness, of caring, of compassion. And then we'll take it from there. So let me stop sharing because I got no more formal questions, and let me also stop the recording.
I had another question.